We firmly believe that you can judge the state of a country by the state of its aircraft industry, and China is no exception here. During the 20th century, China went through a lot of big changes, and the People's Liberation Army Air Force had to overcome a lot of obstacles to get to where it is now. Dividing history into periods is tricky, to say the least. But most experts agree that by now, the Chinese aircraft industry has already gone through 4 distinct stages of development. The first stage is when you're completely dependent on foreign technologies. Chinese engineers started developing aircraft at the very beginning of the 20th century. But despite various efforts to develop China's own aviation industry, when the war with Japan broke out in 1931, China had no choice but to rely on fighters supplied by foreign manufacturers. Between 1937 and 1945, if you went to the very few airfields China had, you'd see the wildest assortment of aircraft from all over the world, including designs from the US, the UK, the Soviet Union, France, Germany, and even Italy. Soviet I-16 fighters and SB bombers were often sitting side by side with American planes built by Curtiss and Martin. And later they were even joined by Japanese aircraft captured from the Imperial Japanese Army and the Imperial Japanese Navy. A few years later, all those vehicles were thrown into the crucible of the civil war between the pro-Western Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party. Near the end of the conflict, the former flew the American Mustangs and Thunderbolts, and the latter used the Soviet LA-9, the Tu-2, and the IL-10. Soon after the victory of the Communist Party and the establishment of the People's Republic of China, a new conflict appeared on the horizon: the war on the divided Korean peninsula. The newly founded communist state would play a large role in this conflict. But by that point, it was abundantly clear that simply getting the MiG-9 and the MiG-15 early jets from the Soviet Union was nothing more than a stopgap measure. The country needed its own industry that would be able to repair, maintain, and eventually develop aircraft. That's when the Chinese aircraft industry entered its second stage of development, the copying stage. With the support of the USSR, China quickly rebuilt factories previously used by the Japanese, and as early as in the fall of 1951, a Chinese licensed copy of the MiG-15, unofficially known as J-2, was ready for its maiden flight. Just 5 years later, Chinese factories were already producing several variants of the MiG-17, unofficially known as J-4 and J-5. Furthermore, factories in Harbin quickly mastered the production cycle for the H-5 bomber, which was a licensed copy of the Soviet IL-28. In other words, it took the Chinese aircraft industry only 10 years to catch up with their Soviet counterparts. In China and the USSR, the MiG-19 and the MiG-21 were adopted into production almost simultaneously. The Chinese variants were called J-6 and J-7, respectively. It's worth noting, though, that the production of the J-7 did not go as smoothly as with the previous aircraft. By the early 1960s, Sino-Soviet relations started to quickly deteriorate due to doctrinal divergences. As the countries cut ties with each other, Chinese engineers were unable to receive the full technical documentation on the MiG-21. They were forced to fill in the blanks and even reverse engineer some parts, and because of that, the Chinese J-7 made in 1966 was not a full copy of the Soviet vehicle. That was the beginning of a new stage, the Reinterpretation Stage. As they lost access to cutting-edge Soviet tech, Chinese engineers started working with technical data obtained by the Chinese intelligence all over the world, and used that data to kickstart the development of their own designs. For instance, the J-7E uses a completely new wing. Unlike the MiG-21, it features a double delta configuration, with the outer wing having a reduced sweep. Moreover, the J-6 was used as a platform to develop the legendary Q-5 ground attack aircraft, as well as its export version, the A-5. The Q-5 turned out to be so effective that it still remains in service, and in several countries, no less. Time went on. Sooner or later, Chinese engineers had to make the leap into the uncharted territory of designing and producing wholly original designs, which is the mark of the fourth stage of development. This new era began on the 5th of July, 1969, when the first prototype of the J-8 interceptor aircraft took to the skies for the very first time. Granted, the design was heavily influenced by the ideas of Soviet engineers. You could see glimpses of the MiG-21, the experimental MiG YE-152, or the Su-9 in the design, but it was in fact 100% Chinese. Later in 1984, the more advanced J-8-2 made its maiden flight. The J-8-2 replaced the nose air intake with a radome and side air intakes to make room for a modern radar. The J-8 was the most advanced aircraft in service of the PLAAF till the very end of the 20th century. After that, the Chinese Air Force gradually started to employ new and even more powerful aircraft, leading some experts to believe that China had already moved past the fourth stage into the new, fifth era of aircraft development. But it's way too early to know that for sure. But if there's one thing that is not up for debate, it's the fact that it took the country only half a century to become an industrial behemoth and achieve astonishing breakthroughs in the aircraft industry. Last century, it was China that did its best to catch up with the rest of the world. These days, it's often the opposite.